The morning they buried her father, Marguerite Ashford learned she had nothing left. Not nothing in the way people say it when they mean very little. Nothing in the way that is exact and complete. The solicitor, a thin man named Mr. Croft, who had served her father for 30 years, sat across from her in the study that no longer belonged to her and read from a document that confirmed what the rumors had been whispering for months. Thornvale. The house, the grounds, the tenant farms stretching east toward the river. All of it had passed to her cousin Deverell Ashford by terms of an entail that her father had never bothered to explain to her because, she supposed, he had never imagined dying before he corrected it. She was 23 years old. Her mother had died when she was 9. She had no brother. She had managed this house, these accounts, these people, for the better part of 5 years while her father's health declined. And now a man she had met exactly 4 times in her life would take possession of everything she had ever known. Mr. Croft folded the document carefully. He looked at her with something that might have been pity, if pity could be made uncomfortable by its own presence. "There is a small bequest," he said. "Personal effects, some jewelry, enough for modest living arrangements." "Thank you," Marguerite said. Her voice came out steady. She was proud of that later. She did not cry until she was alone in the garden, standing in the place where her father used to read in the afternoons, where the lavender grew thick along the south wall, and the light came in long and warm in the late summer hours. She stood there and she let herself cry, once thoroughly, the way you do when you know you cannot afford to do it again for a long time. Then she went inside and began to think. Deverell Ashford. She knew the shape of him. He was a man who had inherited money from his mother's side, spent a portion of it badly, and recovered through a marriage that lasted 6 years before his wife left him and moved to Edinburgh with the children. He was not cruel, as far as she knew. He was simply careless. The kind of man who would install himself at Thornvale, make improvements without understanding what the improvements were for, and expect the tenants to adjust. He would need a housekeeper. The thought arrived quietly, without ceremony. She almost dismissed it. Then she let it sit. She had run this house for 5 years. She knew every room, every account, every name of every family on the tenant farms. She knew which chimney drew badly in the east wing, which supplier in the village could be trusted, which could not. She knew the cook's temper and the gardener's pride, and the precise hour in November when the boiler required attention, or it would not make it through the night. She also knew that Deverell Ashford had never met her properly. He had attended her father's funeral that week with the vague, correct expression of a man fulfilling an obligation. They had exchanged perhaps 12 words. He would not have known her face if she passed him in a corridor. She wrote a letter. She signed it with her mother's maiden name, Harwell. Marguerite Harwell, formerly in service at an estate in Devonshire, seeking a position as housekeeper. References available upon request. She wrote the references herself, using the names of people who no longer lived in England. It was, she understood, not an honorable thing to do. She did it anyway. The first week at Thornvale, she did not allow herself to feel anything she recognized as feeling. She was Mrs. Harwell. She walked through rooms she had grown up in and catalogued the new master's preferences. She spoke to the staff she had managed for years with the precise, professional warmth of someone meeting them for the first time. Cook, Mrs. Peel's replacement, a woman named Bridget, who had been hired from outside, proved efficient and direct. The footmen were new. The parlor maid remembered her. She was almost certain of it, but the girl said nothing. Deverell Ashford arrived on a Tuesday with 2 traveling trunks, a man of business, and very little ceremony. He was 40, perhaps 41, with the look of someone who had been handsome once and let it go without particular regret. He toured the house with the man of business, made several observations about the lighting in the west corridor, and then sat in the library. Her father's library with her father's books still arranged exactly as her father had arranged them, and called for tea. "Mrs. Harwell," he said, not looking up from whatever paper he was studying. "What can you tell me about the state of the East Farm?" She told him. Everything she knew, which was considerable. He listened with the particular attention of someone who is surprised to be receiving useful information. When she finished, he looked at her properly for the first time. "You're very well informed for a new appointment," he said. "I make it my practice to understand the full picture," she said. "It prevents problems later." He nodded slowly. "Good. That's exactly what I need. Whitfield left me almost nothing by way of notes." He meant her father. He said it without thought, the way people say the name of someone they did not know well. She kept her expression still. "I'll prepare a full accounting," she said, "by the end of the week." She did. That was in September. In October, the Duke of Harwich arrived. She heard his name before she heard anything else about him. Bridget mentioned it first, with the slightly elevated color of someone passing information they have decided is important. Lord Calander, the Duke of Harwich, had written to Mr. Ashford. He would be visiting Thornvale before the season. He had been away, the army, someone said, though Bridget was not certain of the details. Years, in any case. Marguerite set the table linens aside and asked as casually as she could arrange it what the connection was. "Old friends, I think," Bridget said, "or something like. Mr. Ashford mentioned it once. Said his grace was, I don't know, something about needing quiet. He hasn't been back to England long." Marguerite filed this away and said nothing. She had known the name Calander her entire life. The Harwich estate bordered Thornvale to the north. When she was a girl, she had climbed the stone wall that marked the property line and looked into the Harwich fields, the way children look at things that belong to someone else, with admiration and no particular envy. The family had been absent for most of her childhood. She had never met any of them, but she knew the name the way you know the names of weather patterns and neighboring counties, as a fixed feature of the landscape. She did not know what she was expecting when he arrived. Something grander, perhaps. Something that looked more like what it was. Lord Calander came on a gray afternoon in late October on horseback rather than by carriage, with a single man trailing behind him and no announcement beyond the sound of horses on the drive. Marguerite was crossing the entrance hall when he came through the door. She stepped back. He handed his coat to the footman without looking at it and said something brief to Deverell Ashford, who had come forward with the relieved expression of a man welcoming company. Marguerite did not move. She stood at the edge of the hall, and she looked at this man she had never seen before. He was tall. That was the first thing, and it was the least interesting thing. What she noticed after was the stillness. He stood in a room that was moving, Deverell talking, the footman taking coats, a fire being lit in the far grate, and he was perfectly, completely still. His eyes moved. That was all. They moved through the room with the particular care of someone accustomed to assessing spaces before entering them fully. Then they reached her. He looked at her for a moment. She looked back. His face did not change. "The housekeeper," Deverell said, gesturing. "Mrs. Harwell. She knows the house better than I do, frankly." "Ma'am," Lord Calander said. A single word. Flat. "Your Grace," she said. "Welcome to Thornvale." He nodded once. He had already looked away. He did not speak to her again for 3 days. This was not unusual. She was the housekeeper. Guests did not make conversation with the housekeeper except to make requests or complaints. She understood this. She arranged for his rooms to be maintained to the standard she knew the house could meet. She ensured Bridget understood his dining preferences. She passed his trunks from the traveling man without remark. What she noticed, without meaning to notice it, was the pattern of his days. He rose early, earlier than Deverell, earlier than the footman expected. The first morning, The second morning, the third morning, she found him in the library before the fire had been properly built up, with a book open in front of him that he did not appear to be reading. He did not seem startled when she came in. He simply waited, with the patient quality of someone accustomed to waiting, while she attended to what needed attending to. On the fourth morning she came in and he was standing at the window instead. "The East Field," he said. Not to her, exactly. To the window. "Who manages it?" "The head tenant is a man named Greer," she said. "He's been on the land 20 years. Reliable." Lord Callender turned. He looked at her with a different quality of attention than the first day. Something that was evaluating rather than merely registering. "You know a great deal about the workings of this estate," he said. "It is my position to know," she said. "You've been here less than 2 months. I learn quickly." He looked at her for another moment. Then he looked back at the window. She finished what she had come to do and left him there. She did not think about the way he had looked at her for the rest of that day. She made a point of it. What she had not told herself precisely was why she had taken this position. She had told herself versions of it. To have a roof, to have income, to ensure the estate did not collapse under someone who did not understand it. These were all true. But there was another thing underneath them. Smaller and less comfortable, which was that she could not make herself leave. Not yet. Not while there was still something here that felt like hers, even if it was not hers in any way that mattered legally. She was sitting in this feeling, one evening, in the small room off the kitchen that served as her office, going over the accounts in the way she had been going over the accounts since she was 17, and her father first showed her the ledgers when there was a knock at the door. She expected Bridget. It was Lord Callender. She stood up immediately. "Your Grace, is something wrong?" "No." He came in, which was unusual. Guests did not generally come to the housekeeper's office. He looked at the ledgers on the desk with something that might have been recognition. "Deverell asked me to find him the November accounts from last year. He said you would have them." "Of course." She found the folder without having to look for it. She held it out to him. He took it, but he did not leave. "The accounts go back further than 2 months," he said. He was looking at the ledger on the desk, the one she had been working in. She said nothing. "These entries." He pointed without touching. "The handwriting changes." It did. She had been careful, but she had not been careful enough. For the months before September, the entries were in her own hand because she had made them. After September, they were in Mrs. Harwell's hand, which was a slightly different, more deliberate version of the same thing. "The previous housekeeper's notation," she said. "She left in August." He looked at her. He said nothing for a moment. She held herself very still. "I see," he said. He took the November folder and left. She stood in her office for a long time after, listening to the quiet of the house, which was a quiet she knew better than any other sound she had ever known. The following week, Deverell Ashford had business in town. He would be gone 4 days. The house contracted the way houses do when the primary occupant is absent, quieter, somehow different in its proportions. Lord Callender stayed. She did not know why this surprised her. It should not have. But she had assumed, without examining the assumption, that he was here for Deverell's company, and without Deverell, he would go. He did not go. He rode out in the mornings, returned by noon, spent the afternoons in the library. She learned the rhythm of it the way she learned everything, by paying attention. On the second afternoon, she went to the library for a legitimate reason. A book Deverell had mentioned wanting found, which she had located in the upper shelf, and found him there, as she had known she would. He was not reading this time. He was sitting with the book closed in front of him, and his hands folded on the desk, and a look on his face that she would not have known how to name. It was not grief, exactly. It was more like the expression of someone who has set something down after carrying it a very long distance, and is not yet sure what to do with their hands. She found the book she had come for. She was nearly at the door when he spoke. "How long were you at the previous estate?" "In Devonshire." She stopped. She turned. "Several years," she said. "Did you like it there?" An unusual question. She considered it more carefully than she needed to. "I liked the work," she said. "The work itself." He nodded slowly, as if this had answered something he hadn't quite asked. "That's an honest answer," he said. "I try to be honest," she said, which was not entirely honest, and she knew it. He looked at her for a moment. "Are you from Devonshire originally?" "No," she said carefully. "Where then?" The pause was a fraction too long. "The north," she said. "A small place. Nothing notable." He did not press. He looked back at his closed book. She excused herself and went back to the kitchen corridor, and she stood in the cold of it for a moment before she let herself breathe. He was asking. Not the way Deverell asked. Deverell asked questions, the way people take bites of food, consuming and moving on. Lord Calander asked the way someone follows a sound through a house, carefully, expecting to find something. She did not know what to do with that. She told herself she did not watch for him. This was almost true. She did not arrange to be in places where he would be. She did not manufacture reasons to speak with him. But she was aware of him in the way you are aware of weather, not looking at it directly, but knowing precisely where it is. What she noticed. He spoke to the tenants when he rode out, something Deverell did not do. He knew the name of the boy who tended the horses. When Bridget dropped an entire tray of glassware in the kitchen and stood in the ringing aftermath looking stricken, Lord Calander appeared from somewhere, looked at the mess, said only, "No one is hurt then," and walked on. The storm passed. Bridget recovered. He was the kind of man who made himself smaller in rooms so other people could be larger. She had not known many people like that. She had not expected to find one here, and she had not expected to find herself thinking about it. She told herself to stop. She had enough difficulty, she reminded herself, without adding to it. She was living in her father's house under a false name. She was managing the estate for the man who had legally displaced her. She had no plan beyond the winter, no clear sense of what she would do when she could no longer justify staying. And she was entertaining thoughts about a man who did not know her name. She would stop. She was very firm about it. She did not stop. It was during the third week of Deverell's partial absences. He had developed a pattern of going to town 2 or 3 days at a time, that she came downstairs very early one morning and found Lord Calander in the kitchen. He was standing at the stove. He had made tea, badly, in the large pot that was meant for staff use, and he was holding a cup of it with the equanimity of a man who has made worse mistakes and considers this one acceptable. She stopped in the doorway. He looked at her. "I know where the cups are," he said. "I hope that's not an offense." "It is not," she said. She came in. She looked at the pot. "Though the ratio is wrong, that will be very strong." "I know." He looked at the cup. "I prefer it." She began to prepare what she had actually come down to prepare, which was the morning supply inventory that she did every few days. She worked at the table. He stood by the stove. The kitchen was warm and very quiet. After a while he said, "You're up before the staff. There's more to do early," she said. "That isn't why," he said. She looked up. He was not looking at her. He was looking at the window where the garden was coming up gray in the early light. "It's quieter," he said, "before people start moving. You can hear the house." She looked back at her inventory sheet. "Yes," she said very quietly. "That's it exactly." Neither of them said anything else. But it was the particular kind of nothing that has something in it. The trouble came in December, the way trouble generally does, not all at once, but in pieces that only assemble themselves into a shape when you step back far enough to see it. The first piece, the parlor maid. The girl had been watching her, Marguerite now understood, for weeks. One afternoon she came to the housekeeper's office with her hands twisted together and said, in a rush, that she was very sorry, she hadn't known what to do, she hadn't meant to know. "What do you know?" Marguerite asked. She kept her voice even. "I worked here before," the girl said, 2 years ago, for the old master. I was only kitchen staff then. But I've seen you, ma'am, I've seen you here before." Marguerite looked at her for a long moment. The girl's name was Nell. She was perhaps 17, with the kind of face that could not lie without everyone in the room knowing it. "You haven't said anything," Marguerite said. "No, ma'am." "Why not?" Nell looked at her hands. "Because you ran this house right," she said, "better than anyone, and I didn't think it was fair, what happened." She looked up. "Is it true, what they said, that it all went to the cousin?" "Yes," Marguerite said. "It's true." Nell nodded once, the way people nod when something confirms what they already believed about the world. "I won't say anything," she said. "I swear it." She left. Marguerite sat in her office for a long time. She had known this was a temporary arrangement. She had known, in the abstract, that it would end. But abstract knowledge and the actual approach of the ending were different things, and she sat with the difference of it that evening and felt, for the first time in months, genuinely frightened. The second piece came 2 days later in the form of a letter. Deverell Ashford received it in the Morning Post. She did not see the letter. She saw his face when he came out of the breakfast room. Not troubled, exactly, but changed. That afternoon he called her to the study and asked her, with what she recognized as careful neutrality, whether she had any family connection to the area. "To this part of the county?" "No," she said. "Why do you ask?" "I received some information this morning," he said, "about the previous housekeeper here. A Mrs. Harwick." He stopped. He looked at her. She understood. Someone had found out. Someone had written. Perhaps the solicitor, perhaps someone in the village, perhaps someone who had attended her father's funeral and had now thought about it long enough to notice. "Mrs. Harwell," she corrected him, automatically. "Yes." He looked at her for another moment. His expression was not angry. It was something more uncomfortable than anger. It was the expression of a man who does not want to do the thing he is about to do. "I think," he said slowly, "that we should speak plainly." She was ready. She had prepared herself, in some portion of her mind, for this exact conversation. She would tell him the truth. She had decided. She would tell him calmly, and she would accept whatever followed. What she had not prepared for was the door opening. Lord Calendar came into the study. He looked at both of them. He took in whatever was on their faces, and his expression settled into the patient, assessing stillness she had come to recognize. "I've interrupted something," he said. "No," Marguerite said. "I was just leaving." "Stay," Lord Calendar said. It was a single word, and she stayed. Deverell looked between them. His careful neutrality shifted into something that was almost relief. "Calendar," he said, "perhaps you should. I suppose you should be here for this." What followed was the most unusual 20 minutes of her life. She told the truth. She told it as plainly as she had promised herself she would. Who she was, what the entail had done, what she had done in response, why. Deverell Ashford listened with his hands flat on the desk, and his expression cycling through several states that she could not track precisely. She did not look at Lord Calendar while she spoke. She could not. When she finished, there was silence. Then Deverell said, "You've been running this house for years?" "Yes, running it well. I believe so. Better than it's being run now." This last part sounded less like a question than a painful admission. He sat back. He rubbed his face. "Good Lord," he said, to no one in particular. She waited. She heard Lord Calendar shift somewhere to her right. She still did not look at him. "What do you want?" Deverell asked. He sounded genuinely curious, rather than suspicious. "If you could have whatever you asked for, what would you want?" She had not expected that question. She took a moment with it. To know the house is managed properly, she said finally. That the tenants are dealt with fairly. That what my father built here doesn't fall apart because no one understands it. Deverell looked at her for a long moment. You could stay, he said, formally. As estate manager, not housekeeper. That was beneath what you're doing. Your real name, your real position. He paused. I can't give you the house. The entail is the entail, but I can give you that. She did not know what she had expected him to say. Not that. I would need to think about it, she said. Of course. He stood. He seemed almost relieved, now that the shape of the thing had been decided. Take the afternoon. Take longer if you need it. She left the study. She walked down the corridor and into the side entrance and out into the garden, into the cold December air, and she stood on the path that ran along the south wall where the lavender had died back for winter, and she tried to think clearly. She heard the door open behind her. She knew his step by now. She did not turn around. Lord Callander came to stand a few feet from her, looking out at the same gray garden. You didn't say what you wanted, he said. Not really. I said what I wanted for the estate. I know. A pause. That's not the same thing. She was quiet. The cold settled around them. A bird moved somewhere in the bare hedgerow. How long, he said, did you know you were going to lose it? Some part of me always knew. The entail was never corrected. She found a dry seed head on the lavender stem and turned it in her fingers. I suppose I thought there would be more time, that it would be dealt with before it mattered. And when it happened, I wasn't ready. She said it plainly. I thought I would be. I wasn't. He was quiet for a moment. Then, unexpectedly. When I came back from the continent, from the campaign, I thought I would feel something recognizable, like returning. The country was the same. The house was there. But I didn't feel what I expected to feel. A pause. I didn't feel much of anything. For a long time. She turned to look at him then, for the first time since they'd come out. He was looking at the hedgerow. What changed? She asked. He seemed to consider this with more care than the question strictly required. I started paying attention to small things, he said. Things I'd always looked past. He turned and looked at her. The specific quality of the light in the kitchen at 5 in the morning. The way someone goes over accounts with the same handwriting they've had since they were young. Because you can't really change the way you form letters, no matter how carefully you try. She felt something shift in her chest, not loudly. You knew, she said. I suspected. For some time. He looked at her steadily. I wasn't certain until the ledgers, and you said nothing, no. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Because it wasn't my business to expose you, he said. And because. He stopped. He seemed to be choosing something. Because the estate runs properly when you're in it. The house is right. The people in it are right. Whatever name you use for it, that much is true. She looked at him. He looked back at her. There was something in his face that she did not know what to call. Not warmth exactly, though it was warm. Not softness. Something more considered than either. You asked Deverell what I wanted, she said. For the estate. But you're asking me what I want. Yes, he said. I suppose I am. She looked at the dead lavender in her fingers. She had been carrying a very careful version of herself for 3 months. The version that was Mrs. Harwell, who was competent and correct and gave nothing away. She had carried it so consistently that she had almost forgotten it was a version. I want the house to survive, she said. I want to be useful to it. I want. She stopped. What else? He said. She looked up at him. I don't know how to say it without sounding like I'm asking for something I have no right to ask for. Try, he said. The word was very simple. He said it the way he said most things, quietly, with a weight behind it that was not pressure but something steadier than that. She looked at him for a long moment. He was a man who had come back from somewhere that had changed him, who had learned to be still because the alternative was worse, who had stood in her kitchen at 5 in the morning and said, You can hear the house as if that were the most natural thing in the world, because apparently for both of them it was. "I want to stop pretending I'm not here," she said. It was not quite what she had meant to say, but it was true. He looked at her for a moment. "Then don't," he said. That was all he said. But the way he said it, direct, certain, as though it were simply a decision that could be made. She felt the thing she had been holding very carefully begin to loosen at its edges. The arrangements took time, the way arrangements always do. Mr. Croft came from town and reviewed the situation with the resigned patience of a solicitor who has seen stranger things. The estate management agreement was formal and documented. Deverell Ashford signed it with the air of a man settling a bill he had not expected, but finds, on reflection, entirely reasonable. Marguerite Ashford resumed her name. She moved back into the room that had been her father's study, which was not her father's study anymore, but which she could make into something else. She did not go back to being the person she had been before September. That person had believed that the right thing, done quietly and without complaint, would eventually be sufficient. She had learned that this was not always true. What was required was to be present, fully, in the way that could not be mistaken for anything else. Lord Callender stayed through January. He had reasons, ostensibly. Business in the county, correspondence with the tenant farms, a matter involving the Harwick estate's northern boundary that required sustained attention. She did not examine the reasons too closely. They worked, sometimes, at opposite ends of the library table. He on his correspondence, she on the estate accounts. The fire burned down, and they both ignored it until one of them finally stood to tend it, and this happened in an uncalculated rotation that neither of them had arranged or discussed. One evening in late January, he looked up from his correspondence and said, without introduction, "I've been asked to speak with my solicitor about the Harwick Northfield. It borders the Thornvale East farm." "I know the boundary," she said. "I know you do." He set down his pen. "I thought we might walk it together, to discuss the drainage issues properly." She looked at him. "That would make sense," she said. "Yes," he said, "it would." Neither of them smiled, but something in the room was different after. The walk happened on a Tuesday, in cold, clear weather, the kind of winter day that is sharp-edged and brilliant, and makes the land look very clean. They walked the field boundary for 2 hours, talking about drainage and fence lines, and the particular problem with the eastern ditch that had been a problem since before her father's time, and it was the most naturally she had spoken to anyone in months. At the point where the Harwick land met the Thornvale land, a low stone marker, mossy, slightly tilted, they both stopped. She looked at the marker, he looked at her. "This is where it begins," she said. "The boundary, or where it ends," he said, "depending on which direction you're coming from." She looked at him. He was looking back at her with that particular quality of attention, the one that was not waiting for her to finish speaking, but was simply, entirely, present. "Callender," she said. "Yes. Are you going to say what you're considering saying?" He looked at her for a moment. "Not yet," he said. "But I intend to." She looked back at the marker. "All right," she said. They stood there for another moment in the cold, bright field at the place where the two properties met. London was far away. The house was behind them. The land stretched out in all directions, known and familiar, and hers in every way that mattered most. "The drainage problem on the east ditch," she said, "requires attention before March. I agree," he said. "We should put something in writing." "We should," he said. They turned and walked back toward the house together, their boots leaving parallel tracks in the frost. Spring came the way spring does in that part of the country. Not all at once, but in increments, small and specific. The first green on the south field, the lavender coming back along the wall, the light changing in the mornings, arriving earlier, staying longer. She was in the garden on an afternoon in April when she heard him behind her. She had come to know the weight of his step on different surfaces, gravel, stone, the old wooden boards of the upper corridor, the way you learn anything you pay sustained, honest attention to. She didn't turn around. "The solicitors have spoken," he said. And there is apparently no legal impediment that a reasonable man could not resolve in a reasonable amount of time. She turned around. He was standing at the edge of the garden path. He had his hands in his coat pockets, and his expression had the particular quality it had when he had decided something and was offering the decision plainly, without performance. "I am not always easy to be around," he said. "I understand that. The years away changed things. I am still," he stopped. "I am still working out what I am since the campaign. I don't always know. What I know is that this," he didn't gesture, he didn't need to. "Being here, this is easier than anywhere else. And you are." Another stop. She waited. "You are someone I have looked at honestly," he said. "Perhaps the first person in some time." She looked at him for a moment. The lavender was coming back along the south wall. The light was long and warm. "I am not always easy either," she said. "I spent 3 months pretending to be someone else. I don't do things simply when I could do them more complicatedly." "I know," he said. "I noticed. And you're still here. I'm still here." She looked at him. He looked at her. The garden was very quiet, and the house was behind them, and the land stretched out in all directions. And this, she thought, this was what she had wanted when she couldn't say what she wanted. Not the house, not the name on the gate. This. "Then stay," she said. He crossed the space between them in 3 steps. He took her hand. He held it without letting it go. It was not the dramatic story that London eventually made of it, the lost heiress, and the returned soldier, and the cousin, who turned out to be decent after all. The papers got the outline and missed nearly everything that mattered, but that was always the way with the version of the world that moved in public, at speed, with no patience for what happened slowly, in kitchens before dawn, and field boundaries in frost, and the particular quality of a silence that doesn't need filling. They were married in June, at Thornvale, in the old chapel, that her father had kept poorly maintained, and she had always intended to restore. The light came in through the south windows, the way it always had, long and warm, across stone floors that she had walked since she was 9 years old. She wore her mother's ring. Deverell Ashford attended and wept, to everyone's surprise, including his own. Nell was there, in proper dress, with the expression of someone who has been keeping a satisfying secret and is glad to be released from it at last. And afterward, standing at the window of what was now their home, they watched the evening come down over the fields, and Thornvale settled into the particular stillness of a house that is properly full, not crowded, not performing, but inhabited by people who are genuinely, quietly, unmistakably present. "You ran this house for years without anyone knowing," he said. "Yes," she said, "and you would have kept running it. I would have." He looked at her. "I'm glad I found the ledgers," he said. She looked back at him. "I'm glad you didn't say anything right away," she said. "I was waiting," he said, "until you were ready to be found." She held that for a moment. Outside, the last light was going. "I was always ready," she said. "I just didn't know if you were looking." He put his hand over hers, where it rested on the sill. "I was looking," he said. "I just needed to know where to look.